Okay, so DATS extension. In the previous hours, earlier in the afternoon, we've been covering those aspects. This is the core. I won't be going into more details, but just the convention is that anything in gray belongs to the core. Anything that will be added to the extended version will appear in yellow, if I remember correctly. So this is the limited amount of objects to manipulate. What we are about to introduce are the kind of things I think that have been somehow discussed already at the end of the hour, and as Anita pointed out, this is more the objects that are needed to capture the intent of all data sets produced by studies, and basically that will be the key information that you will find. So in the extensions you will find material, and the extensions to materials are anything that may be used to describe a biomaterial entity, something that is relevant in the field of biosciences, and where we need to be able to talk about diseases, disorders, conditions, things that are involved in materials involved in the biological process, what we call biological entity here. We could be part of another material, things that we need to talk about analytical locations, especially because we are talking about animals and patients and things like that, and we need to be able to understand when we are talking about a plasma sample where this is coming from. We need to be able to talk about species and taxonomic information. This is a key requirement, and we need to have the ability to identify things and place that in a taxonomic tree. And also, of course, because we are talking about molecular entities, we need to be able to talk about things like metabolites, small molecules, protein, nucleic acids, viral particles, and all this kind of thing. So another aspect that is critical, and this is really part of the dataset extension. So we need to be able to cover those datasets that result from a study. From a study here, we need to have the ability to describe basically anything that schedules an activity that is related to defining a study group, which is a collection of patients or subjects of the study. And this we found was necessary, and this came back from the discussion we could obviously identify from the discussion we were having when going over the use cases, where people wanted to know the clinicians if they could assemble or find a cohort that would match a set of elements, inclusion criteria. We also had queries or query use case which identified elements where there was a key aspect related to any form of intervention. So, and this is kind of an extremely important setup or information that we need to capture as soon as we want to push information about therapeutic options to clinicians. And that is really high on the agenda. So these new objects, like a study, activity, which basically is part of a study where we can tracking of the various events that can take place as part of a study. This could be a baseline assessment in a clinical trial, for instance, and also the definition of kind of the various intervention modes that I just mentioned. And of course, the study group will be input to the treatment. A study also defines or schedules data acquisition process, which may be using an instrument, also software. And these are the kind of extensions that you may not need it for capturing information, but as soon as you run into these contexts where you either a longitudinal study or a clinical trial or any of these forms, meta-analysis, for instance, again, you need to be able to talk about those things, which may not be the case in other data sets that we discussed. So this is why we really distinguish between these two objects, or these two set of DATS. So one that's only solely rely on the DATS core, and one that will be needing a few more objects. So going back here, and just we'll spend some time about insisting on the connectivity between the DATS core and the DATS extension. So material how can be described into the core, as we mentioned earlier on. We can just say that the data set is about a set of material. But now, if we want to describe a data set which is a clinical trial, we need to be able to identify the patient, but also we need to capture information about the study. What was the study meant for? So we need to be able to describe the study with a bit more granularity. And this is how we can do that by connecting with a set of processes, either data acquisition or various activities, which can be, again, qualified. All these activities, it could be recruitment, assessment, follow-up, all these kind of things can be typed here. We also need to be able to characterize this form of data acquisition, and this, we will see a bit later, how the input and the outputs are generated by these processes. Anything that is data acquisition study activity or treatment are processes which will have inputs and outputs that can be declared and identified. What distinguishes data acquisition from an activity is that the input is usually either a material or another data, and then you produce data sets, more elements of that sort. Also, the study group here is a kind of interesting element because it will collate or allow you to provide a number of attributes related to the size of the samples. And this is kind of also an important query case we wanted to be able to capture using that. So that this information could be clearly identified and summarized into that message that would be indexed in DataMet. So, yes, the data set here, as it's shown, is the output of the study. But it could also, the set could be viewed as a kind of meta-analysis, and then we would have the study would have many different inputs as data sets, and we will result also as a new data set. And this we can allow to support this kind of use case that was also necessary. We need to be able to document the case of the Cochrane review, for instance, where many review data sets will be analyzed in the context of a particular topic and then resulting itself into a new set of data. So this is what is represented in that aspect here. We have the notion of data analysis, which is again, if we think of these kind of processes and all processes which are loading data as activities, will be qualified by the date of execution, a location, a place. So again, this allows potentially the users or people looking after resources of such data type to be able to document really clearly information about a number of potential confounding factors such as the operator effect or the day effect, which may be important as well to support or to embed into a data set description. So that's basically exposing the connectivity between the data set core, the DATS core, and the DATS extension, which are shown basically here. What also we can allow for, this is part of the core already, but the connectivity from the data set to the dimensions, we can see the relation from the dimension talking about denoting a set of material which are then input or output to a study, and the study may use a reagent as well as a form of material. So that's where we can have the kind of path towards the dimension from the study itself, even though you do not necessarily have to use a study. This is again going back to the notion of when to use that object. And that's probably the main take-home message as well. You need to understand from that not all objects are are required, as it was pointed out this morning. It is really a matter of identifying what you really want to expose from your own resource, what makes more sense in the spirit of what has been developed under that, and use the right object for the right purpose. So that would be quite quick. All this documentation, I will tell you about the information that we have. A lot of this information is available either through Google Docs or through our data tracker. Really, we try to document everything there. You can comment and provide feedback directly through the documents we identify, and of course, we rather have feedback provided to us through GitHub. Then we can have the discussion really completely open and trace. Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, I want to find that Google document first.
Right, yes, you go here to bioCADDie Working Group 3 metadata specification, and then you will have a kind of readme file that will connect you to all the material.
Also through the bioCADDie website,
right.
Group 3, it's
yeah.
all links everywhere.
We also have developed this kind of read-the-doc. This is just the interface to the documentation for user friendliness. Everything is in GitHub, actually. So again, comments are welcome. If you find anything that is missing from the documentation in the read-the-doc form, just let us know by logging an issue tracker, an issue on a tracker, and we will really try to develop more extensions already based on the feedback we received today. That was extremely valuable, and we know now exactly where we need to put some more resources.
The link to this is also through GitHub. You'll find it, and I think also through the bioCADDie website, Working Group 3, right, Susanna?
Everything linked everywhere. No, because people didn't know, so it's everywhere today.
So I think I'm really done with a kind of presentation of the DATS model. The extension is fairly light. It's meant maybe to serve the purpose of representing resources such as Geo, Shortly Archive, or Express, clinicaltrial.gov possibly, where you have a proper study, and then we need to have the right object to support the description of these elements. The DATS core could be used, but any resource on extra properties, which is not what we want to do. It would be too psycho-oriented. We need more specificity here. Again, if you have any questions, we are available for following up on specific use cases or feed that you have in mind.